I'm Mia, a 28-year-old who once had a very different idea of what family love was all about. I was raised to believe that your family would always have your back, no matter what. That's what mothers are supposed to do, right? Support their children, celebrate their wins, and help them through tough times. But life sometimes has a cruel way of proving that the people you trust the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. Last Thanksgiving, on what should have been a joyful day, my mom made a comment that completely shattered my perception of our relationship. It was a turning point that changed everything forever. Before I get into the details of that Thanksgiving evening, I'd love to know where you're from. And if you've ever felt like your family undervalued you, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more true stories. I promise you this one will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about family. To grasp what happened that night, you need to understand the history between my mother, Patricia, and me. Our relationship has always been complicated, but it wasn't always this way. When I was a kid, before my dad, David, passed away when I was 12, things were different. My dad had a way of softening my mom's rough edges, making our home a warm and welcoming place. After we lost him, everything changed. It wasn't just the grief. It was also because we suddenly faced financial struggles we'd never experienced before. Mom started working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, and I could see the stress eating away at her. Over time, that stress turned into resentment, and a lot of that resentment seemed to be directed at me. I became a constant reminder of all her life's difficulties. Every school fee, every doctor's visit, every request for lunch money was proof of how much I was a financial burden. The comments started off small, little remarks about how expensive I was to raise, how other kids didn't require as much, how she could finally relax if she didn't have to worry about me. When I was sick and needed medicine, she'd let out a heavy sigh and complain about another bill she couldn't afford. When I needed school supplies, she'd make sure I knew the exact cost of each item and how hard she had to work to pay for it. I was determined to change this narrative. I dove into my studies and earned a full scholarship to State University for graphic design. I thought maybe then she'd be proud. Maybe then she'd see that her sacrifices for me were worthwhile. But even that accomplishment was met with a dismissive comment about how I was lucky to get free tuition since we couldn't afford to pay for it anyway. College was my escape. For 4 years, I focused on developing my skills and preparing for a career that would finally prove my worth. I studied late into the night, took on unpaid internships for experience, and graduated with honors. But on my graduation day, my mom wasn't in the audience. She claimed she had to work and couldn't get the day off. After graduation, I struggled, as most new graduates do. The graphic design field is very competitive, and it took a while to find a stable job. I took on freelance work, worked part-time retail jobs, and slowly built my portfolio. Every time I visited home during those lean years, my mom would ask how my expensive education was paying off. But I kept pushing forward. Last year, everything finally came together. I landed a job at a prestigious advertising agency downtown. 6 months later, I was promoted to senior graphic designer with a salary that finally allowed me to live comfortably. I moved into a beautiful apartment, started saving money, and for the first time in my adult life I felt financially secure. That's when I decided to host Thanksgiving dinner. I wanted to show my family, especially my mom, that I had succeeded, that all those years of hard work had led to something meaningful. I spent weeks planning the perfect dinner. I researched recipes, bought the best ingredients, and made every dish from scratch. My apartment had never looked better. I arranged fresh flowers, polished every surface, and set the table with my grandmother's china, which I had carefully saved up to buy back at an estate sale years earlier. I should probably introduce the people who would be joining us for Thanksgiving, because understanding the family dynamics is crucial to what happened later. My mother, Patricia, has always lived in the shadow of her older brother, Robert, a very successful real estate developer. Uncle Robert never misses a chance to show off his achievements, pulling up in his luxury car and wearing expensive suits to family gatherings. His wife, my Aunt Susan, is a former elementary school teacher who's a master of passive-aggressive comments disguised as sweet compliments. She has a way of praising you that somehow makes you feel worse about yourself. Their daughter Jessica, my cousin, who is 2 years older than me, has always been the golden child of our generation. She married her high school sweetheart, has 2 adorable kids, and teaches at the same school where my Aunt Susan used to work. In my mom's eyes, Jessica is everything a daughter should be. Then there's Mark, Uncle Robert's son, who's 2 years younger than me. At 26, Mark still lives at home, can't hold a job for more than a few months, and has a drinking problem that everyone pretends doesn't exist. Yet, in our family's twisted logic, Mark is still treated with more respect than I ever was. His failures are excused as him finding his path, or being too creative for traditional work. The week before Thanksgiving, I called my mom to finalize the menu and check for any dietary restrictions. During that call, she made several comments that should have warned me about what was coming. She questioned if my apartment was big enough for everyone, suggested we should have gone with Jessica's house since she had more experience hosting, and wondered aloud if I was just showing off by insisting on hosting. But I ignored her concerns. I was excited to share my success and genuinely believed that once everyone saw how well I was doing, the dynamic would change. My boyfriend, Jake, who I had been dating for 8 months, had witnessed some of these family interactions before and had gently suggested that my expectations might be too high. But I convinced him that this time would be different. Jake grew up in a warm, supportive family where accomplishments were celebrated and failures were met with encouragement. He couldn't quite understand why I was so anxious to prove myself to people who should have been proud of me no matter what. His perspective was both comforting and heartbreaking because it showed me what healthy family relationships could look like. The night before Thanksgiving, as I put the final touches on my apartment and prepared the ingredients for the next day's feast, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety that I couldn't shake. I had spent nearly $1,000 on this dinner, wanting everything to be perfect. The turkey was organic and free-range, the wine was carefully selected, and every side dish was made from scratch using the highest quality ingredients I could afford. Thanksgiving morning arrived with crisp autumn air and the hope of a new beginning for my family relationships. I woke up early to start the turkey and begin the elaborate preparations I had planned. Jake arrived around 9 a.m. to help, and I could see the concern in his eyes as he watched me frantically double and triple-checking every detail. The first family members to arrive were Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan. They walked into my apartment with the kind of expression you'd wear at a museum exhibit you're not impressed by. Uncle Robert immediately started sizing up my living space like a property assessor, commenting on the square footage and questioning if the neighborhood was really safe. Aunt Susan's approach was more subtle but just as hurtful. She complimented my decorating choices with phrases like, "How brave of you to choose such bold colors," and "It's so nice that you're comfortable with minimalism." Every compliment had an undertone that suggested I had failed to achieve a proper adult lifestyle. When my mom arrived with Jessica and her family, the real show began. She walked through my apartment, pointing things out to Jessica as if giving a tour. "Look at how much Mia spent on this couch," she said, running her hand over the fabric. "Must be nice to have money to throw around like that." When Jessica complimented the beautiful flower arrangements I had made, Mom quickly changed the subject by talking about how Jessica always made her own centerpieces and how much more personal that was. Mark stumbled in about an hour later, clearly having already started drinking for the holiday, and immediately made himself comfortable on my expensive couch with his dirty shoes on the cushions. When I gently asked him to take his shoes off, my mom jumped to his defense, saying I was being too precious about my furniture and that family should feel comfortable in each other's homes. The early afternoon was filled with little moments like these. Every effort I made to create a warm, welcoming environment was somehow twisted into a flaw in my character. I was either trying too hard, spending too much money, or being too controlling. Jake watched these interactions with growing amazement, later telling me he had never seen a family work so hard to tear down someone who was trying to do something nice for them. When we finally sat down for dinner, I felt like I was walking on eggshells, even though I was in my own home. The turkey was perfectly cooked, the sides were delicious, and the presentation was restaurant quality. But instead of acknowledging the effort and skill that had gone into the meal, the conversation quickly turned to comparing it to past family gatherings. Mom spent 10 minutes describing in detail how wonderful Jessica's Thanksgiving had been the previous year, highlighting how homey and comfortable it felt compared to what she called my fancy approach. Uncle Robert chimed in with stories about expensive restaurants he had been to, making it clear that while my food was adequate, it wasn't up to the standards of someone who had truly made it in life. As dinner continued, the conversation inevitably shifted to careers and life choices, which I should have seen coming but was still unprepared for. Uncle Robert started by talking about his latest real estate developments, making sure everyone knew how successful his business had become. He casually mentioned million-dollar deals and exclusive clients as if they were everyday things. From there, the spotlight moved to Jessica, with my mom leading the charge in praising her daughter's career as an elementary school teacher. "Teaching is such noble work," Mom said, her voice filled with a warmth I rarely heard when she talked about my accomplishments. "Jessica is shaping young minds, making a real difference in the world. Not everyone can say their work actually matters like that." The implication hung in the air. My work in advertising apparently didn't matter. Creating visual campaigns to help businesses succeed, working with teams to solve complex communication problems, and bringing creative visions to life. None of it counted as meaningful work in her eyes. Uncle Robert nodded wisely and added his own commentary about the importance of stable careers with good benefits and retirement plans. "That's the thing about teaching," he said. "It's recession-proof. People always need teachers, unlike some industries that come and go with trends and fads." I tried to change the subject by sharing news about my recent promotion and the salary increase that came with it. I explained that the advertising agency had recognized my work and given me more responsibilities, including managing a team of junior designers. I thought this concrete evidence of professional success would surely change the tone of the discussion. Instead, my mom's response was to completely diminish my achievement. "Well, it's easy to get promoted when you're young and don't have real responsibilities," she said dismissively. "Wait until you have a mortgage and children, and see how far that career gets you then." Aunt Susan jumped in with her own perspective, suggesting that my generation had unrealistic expectations about work and money. "In my day, we understood that work was about service, not personal fulfillment or big paychecks," she said with that sweet smile that made her words even more cutting. The conversation then turned to family financial responsibilities and what each of us contributed to taking care of aging parents and extended family needs. This was dangerous territory and I could feel the trap being set, but I walked right into it anyway. Uncle Robert began talking about how important it was for successful family members to help those who were struggling. He mentioned several ways he had helped his parents over the years, making sure everyone understood his generosity. Jessica added stories about helping her in-laws and contributing to various family emergencies. Then my mom set the stage for the devastating blow that was coming. "It's funny how family responsibility works," she said, looking directly at me. "Some people understand that success means helping others, and some people think success means buying expensive furniture and showing off." I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, but I tried to stay calm and respond rationally. I explained that I had actually been helping family members financially for years, just more quietly than others. I had been sending my mom money regularly since I got my first decent-paying job. I had covered Mark's car payments twice when he was out of work. I had even contributed to Uncle Robert's business loan, though he had never publicly acknowledged that help. But instead of acknowledging these contributions, the family seemed to close ranks against me. Mark, who had been getting more and more drunk and confrontational, started making comments about how people who live in fancy apartments shouldn't lecture others about family responsibility. Uncle Robert questioned if my financial help had been as significant as I claimed. The worst part was watching Jake's face as he witnessed this coordinated attack on someone he cared about. He tried a few times to change the conversation or defend my accomplishments, but each attempt was quickly shut down or ignored. I could see him struggling to understand how a family could treat one of their own this way, especially someone who had worked so hard to build a life they should have been proud of. The moment that changed everything came during what should have been a casual conversation about future family gatherings and holiday plans. We had moved from the dining table to the living room, and I was serving coffee and the homemade pumpkin pie I had spent hours perfecting the day before. The atmosphere had been tense all evening, but I was still hoping we could end on a positive note. My mom was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one I had saved up for months to buy, holding her coffee cup with a delicate precision that somehow made it look like she was criticizing my choice of dishes. Jessica was showing everyone pictures on her phone of her children's recent school activities, and the room was filled with the warm admiration that I had been craving all evening. "Jessica, you're such a wonderful mother," Mom said, her voice soft with genuine affection. "Your children are so lucky to have someone who puts their needs first, someone they can always count on." Uncle Robert nodded in agreement and added, "That's what family is all about. Being there for each other, being reliable, being the kind of person others can depend on." I saw an opening in the conversation and tried once more to share something positive about my own life. I mentioned that Jake and I had been talking about our future together, maybe thinking about marriage and eventually having children of our own. I thought this would show them that I valued family, that I wasn't just focused on my career and material success. But instead of the warm response Jessica's family updates had received, my news was met with a different kind of attention. My mom's expression shifted, and I could see her preparing to deliver what she probably thought was some necessary, tough love. "Mia, honey," she said, and the false sweetness in her voice should have warned me what was coming. "I think you need to be realistic about your situation. Just because you have a nice apartment and a decent job right now doesn't mean you're ready for the kind of responsibilities that come with marriage and family." Aunt Susan nodded knowingly and added, "It's important to be financially stable before you take on obligations to other people. You want to make sure you can contribute to a partnership, not be a drain on it." I felt the familiar knot form in my stomach, but I tried to defend myself calmly. I explained that I was financially stable, that my career was progressing well, and that Jake and I were both responsible adults who had thought carefully about our future together. That's when my mom delivered the words that would echo in my mind for months afterward. She set down her coffee cup, looked directly at me with an expression of what she probably thought was maternal wisdom, and said with complete conviction, "Honestly, Mia, you can decorate this place and cook fancy meals, but you'll always be a burden to this family. We all know it." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Mark, who had been making snide comments all evening, seemed shocked by the bluntness of what she had just said. Jake's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips, and I watched his face transform from surprise to anger to protective fury in the span of about 3 seconds. But it was the reaction of the other family members that really broke my heart. Uncle Robert suddenly became very interested in his phone. Aunt Susan examined her fingernails as if they held the secrets of the universe. Jessica stared at her lap, unwilling to make eye contact with anyone. Mark actually looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening, but not uncomfortable enough to say anything in my defense. In that moment of silence, something inside me shattered. But something else was born. All those years of trying to prove myself worthy of love and acceptance, all those hours of wondering what I was doing wrong, all those moments of feeling like I wasn't quite good enough. Suddenly it all made sense. It wasn't about me at all. It was about them needing someone to be less than so they could feel better about themselves. I felt Jake's hand reach for mine under the table, and his touch gave me the strength I needed to find my voice. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to speak my truth to this family, no matter the consequences. What happened next surprised everyone in that room, including me. Instead of crumbling under the weight of my mom's cruel words like I had done so many times before, I felt something shift inside me. All those years of swallowing insults, accepting criticism, and trying to earn love that should have been freely given had led to this moment. I was done being their emotional punching bag. I stood up slowly, and my voice was steady when I spoke, which seemed to surprise them more than if I had started yelling. "You know what, Mom?" I said, looking directly into her eyes. "You're absolutely right. I have been a burden to this family, but not in the way you think." The room was so quiet you could hear the coffee cooling in their cups. Continued. "I've been a burden because I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it. I've been a burden because I kept believing that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, and gave enough, maybe you'd finally be proud of me." Mom opened her mouth to interrupt, But I held up my hand and kept going. Let me finish because I'm going to say this once, and then we're going to have a very different kind of relationship going forward. I turned to address the whole room, making eye contact with each person as I spoke. Uncle Robert, you want to talk about family responsibility? I've been sending my mother $500 every month for the past 2 years to help with her expenses. That's $12,000. In case you're keeping track. Uncle Robert's confident expression faltered, and I saw him glance uncertainly at my mom, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and anger. Mark, I continued, turning to my cousin, who was suddenly looking very sober. Remember when you couldn't make your car payments last winter and again this spring? I covered both of those for you. That was $1,400 total. And when you needed money for that job training program you never actually finished, that was another $800. Mark started to say something, but I wasn't finished. And Uncle Robert, when you needed that short-term business loan 18 months ago because your accounts receivable were tied up in that big development project, I gave you $15,000. You paid me back eventually, but you never mentioned it to anyone else, did you? The silence was becoming uncomfortable for them now. But I was just getting started. I had years of suppressed truth to share. Jessica, I said, turning to my cousin, who still couldn't meet my eyes. I've contributed to every birthday party, every school fundraiser, and every family emergency for your kids. When your husband was out of work last year, who do you think paid for their Christmas presents? It wasn't Santa. Now I turned back to my mom, and my voice grew stronger with each word. And you, Mom. You want to call me a burden. I've been supporting you financially while listening to you tell everyone who would listen how disappointed you are in me. I've been covering your expenses while you praise Mark for his potential, and Jessica for her noble career choice. Mom finally found her voice. Mia, you're being dramatic. That's not how things are. No, Mom, I said firmly. That's exactly how things are. But here's what's going to change. I'm done apologizing for my success. I'm done trying to make myself smaller so you can feel bigger. I'm done being grateful for scraps of approval from people who should be celebrating my achievements. Jake squeezed my hand tighter, and I could see the pride in his eyes. That gave me the courage to continue. I worked my way through college while you complained about how much my textbooks cost. I built a career while you dismissed it as unimportant. I achieved financial stability while you predicted I would fail. And through all of that, I kept trying to win your approval by giving you my time, my energy, and my money. Aunt Susan tried to interject with something about family harmony, but I cut her off. Aunt Susan, you've spent this entire evening making passive-aggressive comments about my home, my choices, and my life. You want to talk about family harmony. Harmony doesn't require me to pretend your insults are compliments. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted, and I could see them all struggling to adjust to this new version of me, the version that wouldn't accept mistreatment with a smile. What followed was the most honest conversation I had ever had with my family, though calling it a conversation might be generous, since it was mostly me setting boundaries while they tried various strategies to restore the previous dynamic. My mom's first approach was to try to minimize what she had said, suggesting that I was overreacting to what she claimed was just honest family feedback. I was just trying to help you be realistic about your situation, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, Mom, I replied calmly. Calling your daughter a burden in front of the entire family isn't helpful feedback. It's cruelty. And I'm done pretending it's anything else. Uncle Robert tried a different tactic, suggesting that families sometimes say things they don't mean when emotions run high. We're all family here, Mia. Family forgives and moves forward. I looked at him steadily and said, "You're absolutely right, Uncle Robert. Family should forgive and move forward. So, I'm going to forgive all of you for years of treating me like I was somehow defective for achieving success on my own terms. But moving forward is going to look very different than moving backward." Jessica finally spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. "Mia, I think maybe we all got carried away tonight. You know we care about you." "Do you, Jessica?" I asked, not unkindly, but with genuine curiosity. Because caring looks different than what I experienced tonight. Caring looks like celebrating someone's achievements instead of minimizing them. Caring looks like defending your family member when they're being attacked, not sitting silently while it happens. The room fell quiet again, and I could see them processing this new reality where I wouldn't accept mistreatment and call it love. Jake finally spoke. His voice controlled but with an edge of anger I rarely heard from him. "I've been sitting here all evening watching people who are supposed to love Mia systematically tear down everything she's accomplished. I've watched her try over and over to share good news and have it dismissed or turned into criticism. What I saw tonight wasn't a family dinner. It was bullying." Mom turned on Jake with a flash of anger. "You don't understand our family dynamics. We've always been honest with each other." "There's a difference between honesty and cruelty," Jake replied steadily. "And what happened here tonight was cruelty." I felt a surge of gratitude for Jake's support, but I also knew this was my battle to fight. "Jake's right," I said. "And this isn't his fight. This is about me finally standing up for myself after years of accepting unacceptable treatment." I took a deep breath and delivered the boundaries I had been formulating in my mind. "Here's how things are going to work going forward. I will no longer attend family gatherings where I'm expected to be a verbal punching bag for everyone else's insecurities. I will no longer provide financial support to family members who show me no respect. I will no longer apologize for my success or try to hide it to make others comfortable." The protests started immediately. Mark complained that I was being unfair and holding grudges. Aunt Susan suggested I was letting pride get in the way of family relationships. Uncle Robert tried to convince me that I was making a mistake I would regret. But my mom's reaction was the most telling. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging the pain she had caused, she doubled down. "Fine, Mia. If that's how you want to be, then that's your choice. But don't come crying to us when your fancy life falls apart and you need your family." Her words confirmed everything I had suspected about her motivations. She wasn't just indifferent to my success. She was actively hoping for my failure because my achievements challenged the narrative she had built about me. "I won't be coming to you if my life falls apart, Mom," I said quietly. "But not because I'm proud or stubborn. Because I finally learned that real family builds you up instead of waiting for you to fall down." The evening ended with an awkward and uncomfortable departure. There were no hugs goodbye, no promises to call soon, no attempts to smooth things over with false pleasantries. They gathered their coats and purses with the kind of quiet efficiency people use when they're trying to escape an uncomfortable situation. After they left, Jake and I sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of what I had hoped would be a perfect family dinner. The turkey was barely touched, the expensive wine mostly undrunk, the homemade desserts sitting abandoned on the counter. But instead of feeling devastated by the waste and the conflict, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. For the first time in my adult life, I had refused to accept mistreatment and call it love. The days and weeks that followed that Thanksgiving dinner were a mixture of relief, guilt, sadness, and ultimately, profound personal growth. The immediate aftermath was exactly what you might expect. My phone started ringing the next morning with various family members trying different approaches to restore the previous dynamic. Mark called first, slurring slightly, even though it was barely 10 in the morning, demanding to know why I was acting like such a B********, and threatening to tell everyone what a terrible person I was. I listened to his voicemail once and deleted it without calling back. Aunt Susan's approach was more subtle but equally manipulative. She sent a long text message about how disappointed she was in my behavior, how I had embarrassed the whole family, and how my poor mother was just trying to help me become a better person. She suggested that I owed everyone an apology for my outburst, and that mature adults know how to accept constructive criticism. Uncle Robert tried the business approach, calling to lecture me about burning bridges and damaging professional relationships. He reminded me that family connections could be important for career advancement and suggested that I was being short-sighted in my reaction to what he called a minor family disagreement. Jessica's response was perhaps the most painful because it came closest to what I had hoped for but still fell short. She called crying, saying she felt terrible about what had happened and that she wanted to fix things. But when I asked her directly if she thought my mom's comment about me being a burden was acceptable, she couldn't bring herself to say no. Instead, she kept trying to explain everyone's motivations and asking me to understand their perspectives. The most interesting response came from my mom herself. For the first week, she didn't contact me at all. Then I received a series of text messages that perfectly illustrated her mindset. The first message blamed me for ruining Thanksgiving and embarrassing her in front of the family. The second message accused me of being ungrateful for everything she had sacrificed for me over the years. The third message threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't apologize and return to being the daughter she expected me to be. What she didn't understand was that her threats no longer had power over me. I had spent so many years afraid of losing her approval that I never recognized how little approval she was actually giving me. The threat of withdrawal from someone who was already emotionally unavailable wasn't the devastating blow she expected it to be. I didn't respond to most of these contacts, which seemed to confuse everyone. They had expected me to either apologize and return to the previous dynamic or lash out further. They didn't know how to handle my quiet, firm silence. It was a new kind of power I had discovered, the power of refusing to play their game.